Hi, and welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, what a week in Harrisburg. Senator Rick Santorum came to the Pennsylvania press corps and gave, well, what could only be called a surprising speech. And for the month of August, the legislative hearings have been held on a whole variety of subjects. Some of them are important to you, and we'll get to that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome back, and thanks for watching again. Terry Madonna here for Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Well, Senator Santorum was in town on Monday. In town, of course, means Harrisburg, the state capital, for the monthly Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania
Press Club.
Pennsylvania Press Club. Ray Smith helps me out here. And typically these are all about Pennsylvania issues. They're about the needs and the desires of Pennsylvania voters. What a speech the senator gave. He got into terrorism and what he calls Islamofascism in a speech that I think could be called spectacular, maybe, different, maybe. We'll let our journalists tell me and tell you what it's all about. Joining me, as often is the case, is Ray Smith from Radio PA. Ray, welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to get all your take on this in a moment. Robert Swift from Ottaway News, who is often on a program, and Allison Hawkes from Calkins Media. Well, let me just start, Allison, let me start with you. Were you there?
Yeah, I was, yep.
Yeah, I knew you were. That's why I asked you if you were. I knew at least one answer to a question I'm going to... Were you surprised at this speech?
I was surprised. I mean, Senator Santorum really seemed to be trying to make a real national presence with this speech, to give a real national presence to the issues of terrorism and the nuclear ambitions of Iran. And, you know, he seemed to be really putting it all out there, laying all the cards on the table and saying, look, we've got to do something about this threat out there. And, you know, here's my view of how broad and how the scope of this problem, you know, I think a lot of people were kind of surprised and taken aback by it.
You mean that they didn't talk about sort of, Ray, let me go to you, they didn't talk about, you know, typically don't they come and they say, well, here's a road, here are the roads that problem, here's some issue that really focuses on PA. Now, obviously, this is it's a national issue.
Sure it is. I'm one of the people that's going off a transcript because I wasn't there for that particular speech, but I've certainly read the whole thing. Yes,
go ahead.
But you know, this was more designed, I think, for the National Press Club than it was for the Pennsylvania Press Club.
Yeah.
This was when it looked like pretty much boilerplate national defense issues. With a couple of notable exceptions. He did reference the book. He did talk a little bit about women in the workplace. We were talking about that in the green room before we came out here. But it really was boilerplate national stuff. It didn't really play strictly to a Pennsylvania constituency. But then again, you are looking at an issue that certainly does affect a lot of people in Pennsylvania. In fact, your own poll not very long ago reflected that the war and those defense issues rank very highly with a lot of people.
No, just on another issue, does this not, or a related issue, does this not sort of, it almost seemed, and here we go, we're going to start another one of these rumors about, you know, or our political figures. It sounded like almost this was a campaign speech for the presidency or vice presidency.
I could see this scenario, Terry, happening, say it's election night and it's a bad night for the GOP, but Rick Santorum is one of the survivors, one of the big national survivors. He beats back a big name, and all of a sudden he starts going for 2008, and the theme. He even during his speech on the Islamofascists, he was positioning himself to the right of George Bush, outlining where he disagreed with Bush and where the president hadn't helped his bill on the Iran accountability. So I do think it could be seen that way. Of course, he has to win re-election. He has, you know, made up much of in the polls at least, the lead, in a way, in the Casey lead.
Well, go ahead.
He started his speech by basically listing all the things, a whole host of domestic issues, and his accomplishments domestically and in Pennsylvania. And then he made a clear distinction in the speech. He said, none of that stuff matters. What the big priority is today is national security. And coincidentally, I mean, he polls very well on war on terror, national security issues. I mean, it's great for him to focus on that.
Yeah, but it's certainly true that people can disagree with him, and lots of folks do. He's pretty controversial. I mean, you've all covered stories about that, but he believes this. I mean, he's not being hypocritical about this, is he?
No. Rick Santorum speaks his mind. He has a tendency to do that, and that's one of the things that a lot of people like about him, and that's something that's very discomforting to other people because he doesn't speak in some manufactured element. He has a tendency to say what's on his mind, and that's the way he's thinking.
But one thing you do want statewide candidates to talk about issues like the Iran leader, who some people don't want to have nuclear weapons. But at the same time, when he was asked, he said Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Well, then, what are you going to do about it? And the question was preemptive strike, and he backed off that, and then talked about sanctions, which is a more complicated issue. Unless all the countries are on board, sanctions by one country won't work. So there's a lot of holes that an opponent could pick in that.
Sure. But here's the point. Each of you, I mean, those of you, if you watched it or read about it or were there, did this speech come as a genuine surprise? I mean, did this shock you sitting there listening to this, Allison?
It did because of the way he was talking about this issue. He was saying this is a 1,000-year-old battle between Islamic fascists in the West. He was bringing in the Ottoman Empire into this whole thing. I mean, things that I think a lot of people would scratch their heads and say, I'm not sure the Ottoman Turks really belong as part of this 1,000-year-old battle with Islamic fascism. It was sort of, he cast this wide net in terms of what he was counting as part of this whole issue.
All right, go ahead.
It raises questions about how he interprets stuff.
Okay, all right, we'll pick up on that when we come back. I want to jump into the governor's race a bit and see how that's going. And then we have a whole list of big issues that we're going to get to. Transportation, in particular, transportation funds run out. There's going to be a huge debate. We're going to have some hearings and some other activities around guns, a special session on gun control. It's going to be wild and woolly when the legislature returns in September, and we'll preview all of that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education, 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania, and by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're doing a quick update on the Senate and governor's races in the state of Pennsylvania. We're going to turn to a couple of huge issues that have actually been before the legislature before and will certainly move center stage as after Labor Day when the legislature returns. All right, let's do a quick date in the governor's race. Another week has gone by. Swan now has some television commercials out. Nothing seems to dramatically have changed. Any big news any of you can report?
Not really. Rendell still has his huge lead. He is still doing the retail campaign stump and doing it better than probably anybody else does in this Commonwealth. And something interesting about Lynn Swan is he is beginning to come out and talk a little bit more about his issues, but he does have one fairly annoying habit at this point, and he has brought out his book, A New Beginning, A New Pennsylvania, that little book.
I've read that book.
Yes. Well, he likes to answer some policy questions with, it's in the book.
It's in the book.
And that's not going to play very well if he stays on that continual track. You have to be able to extemporize about what you feel and what you think about issues.
But no big change in the dynamic of that.
No big change. I think it's sort of interesting, Rendell's, some of his official state ads on Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Where he's, come to Pittsburgh, trumping up Pittsburgh, and there was a little bit of scuttle over him doing that and choosing Pittsburgh, coincidentally, where he really needs his votes.
Now, these are the public service announcements that I call, that masquerade. They are political ads masquerading as public service ads, right?
That's right.
And these legislators got them going on, too.
Oh, yeah.
I guess they have to stop them at some point. Is there a
60-day window?
A 60-day window. But all in all, no change in the dynamic.
No, we're coming out of the fair season and the county fair, and now we're getting into Labor Day. But everyone has said that Swan had to be changing stuff by Labor Day, and that hasn't been happening. All
right, Robert, while I have you here, and we're going to take some of these big issues that I know you're going to be writing a lot about. You've already written some about. Let's go to transportation. It's a huge issue. We've got sort of these competing interests going on between the cities and the mass transit activities, and some of those in the rural areas, and the ridges. The roads and the bridges, particularly in the great expanse of the state, rivals for money. Rendell took $400 million and moved it into mass transit. The transportation monies all end I guess, at the end of this year. Take it from there. What's going on
here?
The
Governor's Commission came out with a preliminary report outlining the needs and some of the alternatives. And the thing is, there's no good revenue alternatives with gas at $3 a gallon and likely to stay that way. The last time the state hiked gas taxes 10 years ago, the gas prices were going down. So no candidate right now is going to come out before the election and say they want to hike taxes. This would be a lame duck session issue, but at least I was glad to see that the commission did get at least a preliminary report out there instead of waiting for everything.
But now the critics of that said that this was just a political effort by the Rendell administration
to soften the field for a tax increase, discussions of a tax increase after the election.
But hasn't the governor said that he wouldn't support, didn't he?
No, the governor has said that he's not made commitments either way.
Okay.
He said, I'm going to wait to see what this commission recommends, and that's what we're going to consider around November 15th when the deadline is for them to come out with their recommendation.
After the election.
After the election. So we have a real possibility of discussions of a tax increase happening when you've got a fifth of the legislature lame duck.
Okay.
And Rendell either reelected or not reelected.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to get into this issue of a one-day session on gun control and a whole bunch of gun control bills that I think are going to explode. And you know, debates over gun control are very controversial in this state. We'll take that up when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back. We're chatting about the imminent return, that's a good way to put it, I think, of the Pennsylvania legislature. But prior to their return, they've been doing an awful lot. There have been hearings and commissions, and they've been focusing on some of these big problems. In general, Allison, doesn't it seem like they got a ton of things awaiting them?
Oh, for sure. I mean, they've got to fix the gambling legislation. That's going to be a huge debate.
Right.
They've got a committee of the whole that they've assigned themselves to discuss crime issues.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a minute. Keep
the increase in crime issues. They've got lobbyist disclosure to wrap up.
Man.
I mean, they don't have very many days that they'll actually be sitting at their...
Did you say the gambling, all the gambling legislation?
Right.
We just talked about the transportation one. Well, let's talk about... here we go again, back on crime, and the panacea that some see in gun control. And every time gun control comes up in the Pennsylvania legislature, Ray, this sort of breaks down into two groups. Many urban legislators favoring it, rural legislators paranoid about don't touch our guns. What is this all about this time?
Well, a lot of this is being driven by the problems that have taken place in Philadelphia, obviously. They have had a spree of violence there, which has been very disconcerting, I think, to just about anybody. It's been a terrible problem. Children
Something like
have been being killed. 240
or 250 homicides this year.
Exactly. And a lot of the Philadelphia legislators, Dwight Evans, I know, has been somebody who's been big behind this. Speaker Purcell has agreed with it and wants to go forward with it. And Sam Smith, the majority leader of the House of Representatives, has brought about a committee of the whole session, much like they did for the property tax. It fleshed out a lot of proposals, and it enabled everybody to talk about a lot of different ideas. But you're right, it does break down into a couple of different camps. The urban feeling that you need to control guns, you need to get a handle on this problem somehow, and of course, you get out a little bit further into Pennsylvania where people have had guns all their lives. It's a normal part of life where you don't have people blowing each other up, every 5 seconds. They don't want the government reaching into that.
Philadelphia, by the way, has the lowest legal gun ownership in the state. Now, what brought this to the fore, I think, was the rising homicide and violence rate in Philadelphia. And a representative named Dwight Evans, who has this proposal for one gun a month, which I think was picked up from Governor Rendell's campaign, and he threatened to make this a real big issue before the legislature. to get it out of committee by using a discharge petition. So now, what is this business of the committee of the whole? Explain that a bit.
I think, Terry, that this is an idea of Sam Smith, and I think it's a great thing for incumbent lawmakers 6 weeks before the election. You'll have two different constituencies, as we talked about, appealing to, a whole day to talk about, Roy Adams can talk about the Philly gun problem, and the rural lawmakers can talk about strengthening gun ownership. The Castle defense bills were strengthening the legal immunity that people have if they fire at an intruder in their home. So every incumbent's going to have a day to get up there, have show votes, and I think it's a great thing for all incumbents to appeal to their own constituencies on the issue.
But there is also some danger that this debate will, allow your opponent in this highly volatile electoral year to watch what you say and do, and if you're...
No, I think they're going to be speaking, everyone who gets up and speaks is going to be speaking to their constituency.
Okay.
And I think this is a very safe position for them to take, and in fact it's a very good way for them to sort of speak to their constituency without requiring any kind of action. I mean, the real question is, we're having this day-long debate about crime. What's going to happen afterwards?
Right.
Are they actually going to try and, get some legislation through or come to some agreements on some of these great divisive issues in Pennsylvania with gun ownership? Mm-hmm. Or is this going to fall, into a black hole, mm-hmm. and we're never going to really see it again?
Now, when they did, go ahead, when they did the property tax procedure before the vote, do you think that helped ultimately bring a resolution to the issue, or do you think it...
I think in the property tax case it did, because it did flesh out a lot of different proposals. Everybody got to see where everybody else was sitting on this particular thing, and we did hear a lot of different proposals, anything from eliminating the property tax entirely, which is coming back, by the way, and all the way up until the present plan that we ended up with is kind of a mishmash of several plans that were put forward. So I think it was a start to see where the ground was.
Okay. Well, when we come back, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll let Allison finish up, and then here we go again. Gaming, it's the issue that won't die. There's at least 20 to 30 amendments in the legislature to amend a bill that hasn't even gone into effect yet. Well, it's gone into effect, but no one has dropped a single quarter. Do you drop quarters into a machine, or $1 or a half a dollar? We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers for our Analyst Roundtable. We have three of Pennsylvania's leading journalists chatting with us about some of the big issues that are coming before the Pennsylvania legislature. All that activity is near and dear to our hearts, isn't it, as we follow with great interest what goes on in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. Allison,
or sometimes it's kind of like heartburn.
Yeah, right. Do you remember the point you wanted to make?
Yeah, I do. I've been keeping it in my head this whole time. No, just that I think with the crime discussion, unlike the property tax debate where you actually had some real pressure to get something done, I don't see the same kind of pressure on coming up with some answer to crime. And so I just don't see, like so this legislature operates almost always on a pressure valve.
Yep.
If there's no pressure valve, they're not going to do anything.
That's a great point. And this comes basically from one legislator who was a powerful legislator, however, was going to use a legislative remedy to force a vote on it. But why not just have the vote?
I think that, once again, I think Sam Smith, a brilliant move on his part to help incumbents spend a day talking about it.
So I get your point. You're all in agreement that I'm out in some field, a non-playing field, I guess.
Something might come for Philadelphia. There might be some type of a moderate or small measure that may come out for Philadelphia, but we'll see if everybody else will.
I don't know of anything tougher than getting gun control legislation through the Pennsylvania General Assembly. You all do agree on that, don't you? Tough. I know you cover. Your newspapers are in semi-urban, but you got a lot of rural areas in your coverage.
Yeah, and Democrats out there, interestingly enough, Democratic lawmakers are pro-gun people.
All right, good point. In the remaining time, here we go again. Gaming, it's back on the table. As I said, not a quarter has dropped into a slot machine, and we've got a whole bunch of amendments. There are, 29 amendments in one package introduced by some Senate leaders to go through a whole range of changes they want to make. But let's just go through. Ray, let me start with you. Highlight just a couple of the big changes that they're debating.
Well, obviously they have to deal with this 1% situation. They have to deal with the ownership, and that is one of the biggest bugaboos for.
So that's where legislators are allowed to own 1% up to 1%.
And it's expanding into different areas too. Talking about staffers, talking about other people connected to them in some way. Family members. Right. Family members was a big controversy here not very long ago. But this again stems all the way back. From the fact that they have had problems with the gaming bill ever since it was first passed. There was some jockeying for position in August to try to perhaps bring the legislature back early, which fell flat on its face.
All right, but we also have issues about these so-called middlemen suppliers, where some argue it may provide some work for Pennsylvanians, but also raises the price. And even now, Governor Rendell, who supported it, says no, it's a good idea. Let's get rid of it.
Yeah, although I think there is still some real residual support behind that, behind keeping the suppliers. Right. And I think that could be the real thing that holds up any kind of resolution on this is what to do with the supplier issue. A lot of Democrats feel like we should have these suppliers out there. They create jobs, even though we know that by looking at who they are, they're mostly from people who are very politically connected type jobs. And then there's this very recent debate also on let's just get rid of it. We don't need it at all. But that has been a major sticking point for over a year, even at the gaming board, which was, as it was deciding how to regulate.
Oh yeah, they had that was one of the reasons for months delay, correct?
Yes, and we are here in just following somewhat a race for time. While these lawmakers look at these rewrite bills for the slots law, the gaming board is going to start its suitability hearings for licensees, which is the questions where they can ask an applicant, are you suitable in character and issues such as that?
Right.
Now, there are some changes that lawmakers want to make that they have to make before the licenses are issued. Because if they make them afterward, under the law, the state would have to refund the $50 million license fees if they change the playing field too much.
All right.
So this is a race for time.
All right, we're about out of time, but this is a huge issue, and is there any of you who would disagree with the proposition they will take this up and they will do something on some of these issues before Election Day?
Oh, I think they have to, no question.
You agree?
They will do something, yeah. I think they will. Well, they'll at least talk about it.
All right, what do you think?
Just lobbying disclosure, the only one before Election Day.
All right, that's it. Thanks. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and stay well.